I'm a feminist, and I am very anti-marriage, but I do not think marriage is a bad thing. Every single time I try to bring up such conversations, especially around people who are pro-marriage and, anti-feminist and stuff, they keep saying, oh, maybe it's the content you view, or it's the people you surround yourself with, or something happened in your childhood. I think it's wrong to try and say that we should be able to separate marriage from the attributes that it comes with. It's kind of like a package. You can't tell me to view marriage as a single thing and just take away the control, take away the patriarchy, take away the gender expectations and everything. I don't hate men as a collective per se. I just don't think they are such a big deal. And when you say that, it looks like, oh my God, coming from a Muslim lady, how dare you say that? It looks like society and men in general, I don't think they ever thought of a time where women will not need the male protection, the male providence, the male everything. The other day I had a conversation with one of my male cousins, and he's telling me, he's 19 by the way, and I am 23. He's telling me that, for me to cook for my wife, it will be love. But for her to cook for me, it's respect. Now, I know we're not supposed to take one context and just put it all over, but that's what's happening. He's a Muslim, and I see it, especially from my religious side, yeah? And it stresses me so much, because if this is someone who's barely even a young adult thinking like that, what to say, information ni gani wanapewa, you get? Because wanaipata from their school institutions, from the religious institutions and all that. And also to say that marriage is not a religious institution is insane. Because patriarchy in itself is rooted in religion. We cannot separate the two things. We cannot. So when you say that marriage, religion, and patriarchy are three different things, I don't think that is true. Because at the end of the day, it's one gender up. And we know the gender that is up.
I feel like part of it was directed to the fact that I was talking about individualism a lot and a very personal perspective. And I will still say it because you see the things that we are mentioning, patriarchy, culture, and all that, they will always be there, honestly. That we are getting to a point where even when we get married, they still become very prominent, or they are actually visible in terms of the cultures that other families that you are marrying into have. So at the end of it all, those cultures will be there, and they will be dynamic. The cultures that I will find with the spouse that I will get, and the cultures that you will find with the spouse that we get will be different. The level of patriarchy I will get, or matriarchy, or whatever with the spouse that I will get will be different to yours. So clearly, those dynamics outside of ourselves will shift. The intensity will be diverse depending on who you are, where you are, which region you've married, culture, and all that. So while we are looking at it from, if all these things are elusive, if all these things cannot at some point get to a zenith, if we will never get to an equilibrium of how to handle them, then what is the best solution I can go to? So that is where I was saying, while all these other dynamics are changing, the best solution, or the almost near solution to having a peace of mind in a marriage, is now you individualize it. It now becomes that you form your own culture, you form everything. Because, okay, you've been married to a culture where they are saying you need to respect, you need to work and all that. But when you get in, you can make yours. For example, weddings, sorry. Here we are getting all types of things that we should and shouldn't do for us to get into that house. Some are talking about you have to go Russia, you have to do this, dowry has to get here, a marriage should be done before the dowry, how that became that Christianity is a prerequisite of religion. I don't know how those two are arranged in that order, you see. So if these things come to you as an individual and you don't even conform to them, can't you create your own micro culture where you say, I will do away with culture for me, I prefer, the blessings of a marriage, because that is your culture, that is what you even revere, that is what makes sense to you. So I'm saying that all those things will change, but if you come up with your own foundation as an individual, they won't. Before I finish, because I want this one to get out, marriage is not biological, marriage is psychological. So the point of heterosexual thing, the problems that come with it are not based on heterosexual. They are still universal, whether it is heterosexual or not. So marriage is not biological, it's more psychological.
I feel like the pro-marriage side was very reductive and prescriptive about anti-marriage people, because for me, it's not about, I'm not anti-love or anti-relationships, I'm anti the institution of marriage, which is oppressive and patriarchal, and no matter how much we try to rationalize it, you cannot disprove that fact. That's plain and simple. Even with the Bible, we can go verse for verse and prove that. Higher. Secondly, hata sijui ni point gani, but the prompt that the move against marriage highlights the prevalence of emotional stuntedness, promoting promiscuity in society today. Oh my gosh, and that anti-married people are indisciplined and we are fearing commitment. That's not true. And to even come back to the Kenya HIV/AIDS statistics, that one of the highest groups of women, of people who the new HIV transmission rates is among married women. The highest rates of abortion among married women. So I don't really know what that is telling us about marriage as unmarried people or anti-marriage people. And I don't know what you guys have to say about that. But I wasn't really looking for a response. And also to the person who said that Freud is the father of modern psychology, that's not true. And that Freud is worse than Epstein, it's also not true. And then that someone quoted the methali as wapenda nao ndio wagomba nao. That's not the methali. The methali is wagomba nao ndio wapenda nao. So it's not that because you love each other, you're expected to fight. Then you cannot individualize in the face of an oppressive system. You cannot tell me I'm in an oppressive system, but then I need to look at it from my individual place. Because when you tell women that, when I get married, what does the law say about me as a married woman? Because the benefits that we talk about for women, that your children will be entitled to the inheritance of their fathers, how many stories do we have of children who were born in wedlock and still did not get their father's inheritance because of so many other factors, which some of them are the rampant promiscuity in marriage, so that at the time that your father dies is when you discover that he has 3 other families and those children also want inheritance. So I don't know what that benefit is. And you see, when you're telling me to individualize my experience, but I'm in an oppressive system, so even if I'm married to a feminist man, his parents are not going to be feminists. Maybe my parents are not going to be feminists. And because we are married, that, by the definition of it, is that my family has a stake in that marriage, my culture has a stake in that marriage, and the law has a stake in that marriage. So no matter how much we've individualized it, I'm still making myself vulnerable to oppression by getting married. Then, anyway, ni vitu mingi, but yeah, just...
Ambassador of the people. Is there anybody who wants to respond to that? Any part of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Very short.
Yeah, it's very short.
30 seconds each for the two of you.
The thing is, a lot of the time, you confuse people who say we're anti-marriage with anti-love. And for me, I've always been and will always be anti-patriarchal, because it is not beneficial to one gender, and even it's not beneficial, it is like a cap lock to that specific gender that it benefits. And with this, what happens, it locks everyone else who does not fit into the patriarchal norms, or you're religious, or whatever you believe in, they are automatically shunted to the south. So when we say we are anti-marriage, I'm not anti you getting married. I just do not support the marriage that you want to make it sound like it is beneficial, when truly the system that is there cannot allow you to be individualized.
To his point...
I think I was the right person to respond.
Same sentence, just one sentence, and then you let me.
Okay, go
to
ahead.
his point, when I say I am pro-marriage, I am telling you the choice that I will make. I am not telling you, please get married. I am extremely, what's the word? I think I was telling the organizers of this thing that I suck as a debater because I'm very nuanced. That's why you're also seeing me shifting the coin many times. To your point about Sigmund Freud being the father of modern psychology, perhaps I did not word that well, but he has really, modern psychology has drawn a lot of influence from his work in psychoanalysis, etc., etc. When I talk about him being worse than Epstein, I stand my ground, do your research. That man was behind a lot of actually children sacrifice, a lot of cannibalism. His work, you can choose to view him as a professional, but you can also view him as the things that he did that influenced his professional side, and it was a lot of dark spiritism. That's why I say he's as worse as Epstein. He's more terrible than Epstein. What's the other thing I wanted to comment about? Yes, so this is the thing. And I think I did not get the chance. Oh yes, individualism. Sorry, I'll be very quick. I'm also a believer in making your own choices. You understand? I'm not here to tell you what you should do with your life. I'm telling you what I've chosen to do with mine. But if I was to be very honest, if I was to sit in this, we were actually talking with the panelists over there, and we were like, you know what? Some of us can actually go and argue on the anti-marriage side to balance things out. But I also saw it's not going to be honest of me, because 3-5 years down the line, you see me walking down the aisle, and then you're like, question mark. So that's it.
I think for instance, I will be very brief and in the interest of time. The good lady here raised about the promiscuity that married men are involved in, whereby they have a spouse and they try to cheat on and have children outside the wedlock. I think in law, the child, of course, the child has no problem. It is, the child has never submitted an application to the parent to be born outside the wedlock. So, but in law, preference is always given to what is binding. And marriage, certificate where you consent, where you vow, I think is binding. Yeah, that is what I just wanted to add on. Thank you.
I think this would go to Hakeem. You have said you're very anti-patriarchal. So I have a question concerning that. Here's what I think. From my perspective, when it comes to structures in the world, they can either be patriarchal or matriarchal, basically male or female, right? Now, for you to maintain a structure, I think we can all agree that you need power. For you to maintain your influence in the world, you need to have power, right? Now, between a man and a woman, physiologically speaking, a man is already built ahead in the power aspect. Now, if a woman would like to wrestle that power away from a man, you have to fight that man for you to dominate, for you to put your influence on the world. You need to make him step away. You're not going to do that cordially, ever. So, if you look at the statistics, an average man tends to be stronger than an average woman. So I do not think a patriarchal structure is going to go away if you look at it from that dynamic. If you look at it from this dynamic of power, it will never go away. Because that influence, it is very hard. Probabilistically speaking, it is very hard for you to fight against a man and win as a woman. Now, here's my view. If you take a look at the patriarchal structure from a human perspective, I've heard you guys quote so much that the woman is supposed to submit to a man. But how come we're not talking about where the man submits to the woman? Where the woman devotes her life to taking care of the man, and the man does nothing else in this world but make sure that she's taken care of, provided for, and protected. Why are we not talking about that?
Very good question.
Asking the real questions.
That's a nice question. I'll start off by saying...
Very short.
Yes, very short. I'll start off by saying, funny enough, you've used strength as an example where patriarchy is completely an emotional game. Patriarchy is an emotional game. It has never been a physical game. That's why there are systems. That's why it is a system. You have to be. It is intellectually systematical. It goes within your brain. It is never about you standing here, because logically, you know a man is stronger. Everyone knows that. Even a kid knows that. But patriarchy is never about strength. Rather, it's about one gender realizing we can get an upper hand, put our own ways of seeing life and wanting life that way, and push it to everyone else. And your view of patriarchy is very limited a little bit, because patriarchy is never about man and woman only. There's so many other people who exist in this world other than heteronormative people. There are queer people. They don't exist in these spaces. Yeah. You have to also open your mind about kidogo. So what are you going to say? A gay man will not agree with a patriarchal man, because a patriarchal man is up to telling this gay man, you are not man enough. That is still patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Patriarchy
okay.
is never about man and woman. Patriarchy is about man.
Okay, Hakim. Nice. Yeah.
So I think there are two ways in which I'm going to attack your position. Firstly, I think it's based on a false dichotomy that if we don't have patriarchy, we have matriarchy. When feminists have always been arguing that what we should be having is equality and not equality or equity, and whereas the strength that men have should not be used for the purposes of domination and should instead be used for the purposes of for anything more productive than that. Yes, exact cooperation and stuff like that. And the second thing I'd like to say is that it's that equation of strength with domination, because as you suggested, there's expectation that men should be able to use their strength for certain purposes. But what we would want is that, I mean, for myself specifically, I know I'm not the strongest person here, but I would want a really strong person to act more like Superman and less like Omni-Man. A person who doesn't see his strength as a reason why he should be dominating above others, but someone who should be using his strength to be able to create a world that's better for everyone. So I'd say those are the two reasons as to why we shouldn't really be seeing that if we remove the domination that men have had for all this time, that it'll end up meaning that women install a matriarchy there. So.